Everyone. It is the Our Turf Football Podcast. I am Dana. Joining me just this week, it's just the two of us this week, Kate. We're like just slimming it down a little bit tonight. Gonna talk about the NFC South twice now. I have typed out the promo for this show on Twitter, and both times I have written NFC North. I don't know why.
You missed that show. We did that one.
And then I was talking with a friend of mine, and I was laughing that I kept doing it. And they're like, well, that's because the NFC South is pretty much forgettable. And I said, that's not true. It's a good division. For some reason, I just kept messing up. So we are here
for the weird division. It's a weird division. I'll say that.
It is. As I was looking around at like draft and the offseason moves and stuff that we do for this show. It was interesting because you'd see half the people give rave reviews for all four teams, and they were doing this and doing that, and they're gonna be so good. And the other half of the media world was like, boring, whatever. Tom Brady will win everything. Like, it was almost just like no one could quite decide what they were doing. I don't know. It was really strange. I want to stop. Did you see I has a new background? We're working on this shelf, so it's a little more interesting.
I'm in my dining room today. I moved it. That's okay. By the time the season, the off season is over, I will have been in every room in my house. Probably not the bathroom, but every other room. Although the lighting in my bathroom is nice, so I might have to try one show from the bathroom. But
I did watch a podcast once. I don't know if it was the Calm Down podcast. I can't remember, but I feel like it was Carissa and Aaron's podcast. And one of them was in a hotel room in the bathroom because the lighting was so good. So I don't think you're wrong. I don't think you'd be the first one to do it. All right. I had asked you in an email how you felt about chatting with this. Do you want to talk about Deshaun Watson at all? Or are you just freaking over it?
We're up to 24 women now.
24.
And there are still people saying that it's a conspiracy and they're lying and whatever. You set that aside. Mm-hmm. I still don't know who my quarterback is going to be opening day. I think it's going to be Jacoby Brissett. There's heavy conversation that Baker Mayfield is still pouting and will not show up for OTAs. He's still on our roster. One of the teams we're going to talk about tonight is the hot team that everyone thinks he's going to end up in, but it's June 7th, and Baker's still a Cleveland Brown. So I don't know what that means.
He costs too much. He just costs too much.
It's the way they structured his deal, and he's $18.5 million is what's owed to him this year. And unless the Browns agree to pay 17.5 of that, it's going to be hard to move him. I'm looking at Jacoby Brissett probably for weeks 1 through 6. Now that there are 2 more allegations that have come out in the past couple of weeks, I think my biggest problem with that is that now sets the NFL's investigation back because they're going to have to go look at that. So it's going to be even longer before they reach a decision and let us know how many weeks he's going to be out. Right? Ben got 6 weeks for allegations from 1 or 2 women. It was nothing like this.
Zeke Elliott,
one is the one that finally, and then they settled with her, and he got 6 weeks. So I don't know. I'm assuming 6 weeks minimum. It could be the entire season. Looking at the way they scheduled his contract and his guaranteed money, I feel like the team is prepping for it to be the whole season. And if that's the case, Jacoby better be getting more reps in practice and training camp because he's going to be my week 1 starter. It's just so many things are up in the air, and I think that's setting the character things aside. From a football standpoint, you went all in on this man and you paid him a ton of money, and you may not have his services for the entire first year. And we won't know with the way the NFL does things. We may be in a couple weeks of the preseason before we know what the actual suspension is going to be, but it's going to be something. Please don't drag this into next season or mid-season and make a decision.
And Kate, that's what I was wondering. It's like, is it almost unfair? Just come down and say you're not going to let him play this year, that you got to let the rest of us play out.
Say it's a year, and then if we get farther into and closer, you know what, we'll shorten it for you.
Whatever it may be.
Whatever you want to do, if that's it. But
for the NFL. And I get that. I get that they are in a spot where they're like, okay, legally, he was not charged with anything, but this cannot be ignored. And, Ben wasn't charged anything. Zeke Elliott wasn't charged anything, blah, blah, blah. But that was 1 woman. This is 24. He saw 66 different women in that. It's too big to just say, "Oh, we'll give him what we gave the rest of the guys." I just
Right.
don't think it's there. I am finding it really disturbing, Kate, more than anything, his teammates, they almost feel like in these pressers that they're trying to support him the way he plays football. And you can see them trying so hard to talk about the football aspect of it. It's like, you know what? Don't do that to this team then. You know what? Let him sit. If you're going to have him sit, come down with it now. Come down with it in July.
Yep.
Let him sit so that these teammates can stop this twisting of the towel to try and make it sound like they know what he did was wrong, but we have to support him. He's our teammate, but he's great. He throws a great ball. I just think it's too many gymnastics, too many hoops. I think it's
and he's going to a brand new team. So there's already, without all this, there's already the him versus Baker stuff going on in the locker room.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hearing that some of the people were not happy with Baker in the locker room. So some of the players aren't sad to see him go, and yet he's still here. So you've got that tension. And then you've got the media asking people who have never played with him about their thoughts of him and what they know of him. And they've got to be very careful about what they say, because they don't know him. They weren't on the Texans with him or at Clemson with him. They haven't seen him day in and day out. They don't know him the way you know players at the end of a season together, right? The amount of time you spend together practicing, locker room, traveling, games, they don't know him very well. And so they've got to be careful. It just puts them all in a bad position. And I just wish the NFL would say, you know what, we're going to suspend him for a year, and then he can appeal it to be shorter, and they can go through that process, but we can move forward with everything else the Browns have to do. After last season, and as disappointing as that season was for the fan base with Baker's injury and everything else that went on, to be so up in the air this offseason is just, it's incredibly frustrating, and it's unfair. It's unfair to the fans, and I think it's unfair to the other players as well.
Oh, without question. Without question.
So
and I think it goes to be without saying that everyone who's ever paid any attention to us, our Twitter, our podcast, they know exactly how we feel about Deshaun Watson. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the football side of it. So,
and we do that. People keep asking me, and I'm like, you don't start that. don't open it. Do you want me to tell you what I think? Here, let's start. And I tell all of them, we're going to take the personal character things and we're going to put them over here. And we're just going to talk about the football decisions that were made by the team and what's going on with the football part of it. And it's just all very confusing.
And I don't want anyone to misconstrue that. I don't want them to think that we're ignoring that. That's not it. We talked about it very at length earlier in the season on a podcast. You can go back and watch it. And we held nothing back about the way we feel about Deshaun Watson. And no one should ever have any question about the way we feel about that personal stuff. But we try to keep it as close to football here. But it's still a distraction, and it's still called football. All right. So before we jump into the NFC South, I want to encourage anyone who's watching us on Twitter, come over to YouTube. Come over and hang out with us in our live chat. You can sit there and ask questions. You can chat with the other people in chat, and we will answer your questions live. And we might say, hell if I know, but we'll answer it one way or another. You never know. So please, if you're watching on Twitter, join us over here on YouTube. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. This division, as we started out, Kate, we said was very interesting. It's extremely top heavy, which we understand. You have the Bucks there. And then we have trickle down to the Panthers. We have both ends of the spectrum here, but I want to start with the Carolina Panthers. Okay, so they ended last season with a sad 5-12 record. Sam Darnold, I will tell you, on one of the UK podcasts that I do, we have talked at length, Sean and I especially talked about at length, how we really felt when Sam Darnold left the Jets, he deserved a second chance somewhere, that the Jets was not an appropriate place to evaluate him as a quarterback. Well, we've had that time now, and we can say the Jets weren't wrong. So I think that, and I feel bad, but it's just the truth. And so there was a lot of holes, a lot of missing pieces on this team. And watching them play last year, it was just frustrating. Not to mention Christian McCaffrey never being able to stay on the field, but that's another conversation. But this team as a whole, it just was so lackluster. There was just so much missing.
There was. I covered two divisions for our turf there. So the ones where I watch the most games, the AFC North, obviously it's my home division, and then the NFC South. And I was super excited for the Panthers when they got Darnold, because I really liked him when he came out of college. he was my favorite quarterback in the draft where we ended up with Baker Mayfield. And he got off to a really great start in Carolina. I thought, finally, he's in the right system. They're going to do what works to his strengths. It's going to be awesome. Did I lose you? Okay, no, I didn't lose you. I thought I lost you for a minute. Sorry. My computer's doing weird things. And then somewhere around midseason, they imploded. They lost their last 7 games. And they lost them in just awful ways. They were they were not good, and it just all fell apart. Whatever little bit they were doing to make Sam Darnold successful at the beginning of the year, part of it is defenses caught on to it, right? They've got now a few weeks of tape, and then they just stopped doing the things that were good for them. What I thought was interesting in the draft is when they picked 6th, I believe, they didn't go after one of those quarterbacks. They went after Ike Ekwonu for the offensive line, which might have been maybe one of the smartest picks in the top 10 as far as a team really understanding its biggest need and its biggest need that helps them for the future. Because no matter who they have under center, they needed to get some work done on that offensive line. So picking up Ike was just a fabulous move for them. And then even later in the draft, picking up, Cade Mays and Edge Barno and Kalen Barnes. I mean, some of the choices they made, Brandon Smith's going to be one of their new linebackers. They did a really nice job with filling in the guard positions and adding depth to that line. So again, whether it's Sam Darnold at quarterback, whether they end up doing this trade and getting Baker Mayfield, or if Lisa was here, she'd want to talk about Matt Corral and the moves they made to go up and get him. And is he going to – I don't think on a normal team he would be ready. I think he's one of those guys who needs a year to get a little better sense of the NFL and the game and the speed. But Lisa will tell you when you take a quarterback and he's on the bench and he's behind someone like Sam Darnold that there's going to be a quarterback competition, and we could see him by week 6 or 7 if things go well. So I mean they spent up quite a bit to go up and get him. So they must have really liked him. He wasn't in my top quarterback range. He wasn't someone that I was looking at for them. But after the fact, he fits what they do or what they want to do or what they're going to try to do. I'm still trying to get a good feel for Matt Rule and how he coaches because he's still relatively new.
This will be his third season. Third season.
And so, his third quarterback. Fourth quarterback. I mean, his third, depending on how they end up starting the year, he's had very different things to work with from a quarterback standpoint.
Right.
Because he had Cam Newton, and then he had Sam Darnold, and now he's got, I don't even know who all's on the depth chart. It's a hot mess.
Here's the interesting thing, I think, with that, and we're going to talk about this. I want to talk about this at the end of when we're done talking about every team, but there's a handful of teams in this division alone that could be looking at those quarterbacks next year. And there's three of the 4 could truly be looking at the quarterbacks this year. That's why I was surprised they went and got Matt, because I thought they waited till the 94th pick to pick him up. It just seems like they're like, well, he might be good. We'll see what happens. But really, we're going to tank for next year unless there is that spark. I never want to underestimate those later round quarterbacks because they can really pop up and surprise you. I mean, Russell Wilson is probably the most obvious example. Tom Brady is the biggest example. But I do think that, that there is some value in that, even if it's just, well, we're not going to lose every game this year. But, I think that makes sense there.
We could be having this conversation, a year from now of how smart were they to get Matt and have him sit for a year so that when the Falcons and Saints grab their rookie quarterbacks, Matt's already got his training period under the belt and he can start week 1. And if they're, top pick, if they get quarterbacks in the top 3 and they get these high ranked quarterbacks that are going to start, he's at least got a year of NFL under his belt already. And so maybe they're geniuses for doing it this way.
It could be. So right now, if you look at kind of the depth chart for Carolina, you have Sam Darnold, Christian McCaffrey. Availability is the best ability. Christian, I'm just saying. That's what I just keep
Can't
saying.
score touchdowns from the locker room.
I know that guy. And someone always grabs him immediately in fantasy football, and I always laugh every year. And that was so sad because the kid is stupid talented. I mean, we're not questioning that in any way, shape, or form. He just has no durability. You have DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, Terrence Marshall Jr., who is one of their draft picks, so that won't be so bad. Then let's see. They have Tommy Tremble as their tight end, their first tight end. Giovanni Ricci, Ekwonu, Ivan, Bradley Bozeman. Hey, a name I recognize. Look, I went all the. I'm not trying to be snarky. It's just the truth. If you look at their depth chart, there's not a lot of name recognition there. There really isn't.
There's not, but they also have plenty of cap space. So they've
Fair.
still got the ability to make some moves if they need to. They don't have high-priced guys that aren't able to play, aside from McCaffrey. They really don't. So Darnold's still technically on his rookie deal. With the trade and what they're paying him, he didn't get free agent money with that trade and that deal. So they do have they're in the best positioning from a cap standpoint in the division. So if somebody does come up still available, or if there's an injury and they've got to go replace someone, there are still plenty of free agents out there looking for a home, which is why their disinterest in paying Baker Mayfield the last year of his contract is a little frustrating. I mean, I guess from a risk reward standpoint, you've got Sam Darnold and now you've got Matt Corral. And so why spend 18 on Baker if you're not sure that Matt's going to pan out and you're okay with losing enough games? 5-12 is rough. They were 5-5 at one point and they finished 5-12. And that's at some point their fans are going to be done rebuilding. Right. You know what I mean? I feel like we're in year 3 or 4 of a rebuild and they're not making progress.
So to wrap up the Panthers, I want to ask you one question. First of all, I don't think either one of us see them making a huge jump next year. I don't see this roster making a huge change. In fact, I would not be surprised if Christian McCaffrey is not traded before the trade deadline, if they were really stinking, so they can get some more draft picks to kind of fill up through next year. So my question is for you, if that happens this year, does Matt Rule lose his job?
No, I think he gets one more year, but I love the idea of them trading McCaffrey because running backs have a shelf life, right? They only have so many years. He's already been injured a lot. And how much longer are you going to hold on to him so that maybe I get a quarterback in next year's draft and then I got to hope for another year? It's a very interesting thing to consider if they decide that this is a bottom of the barrel rebuild instead of this little piecemeal rebuild they've been doing. I think at the end of next season, it is more likely that Matt Rule is still there than it is that Christian McCaffrey is still a Panther at the end of the year.
I completely agree. 100%. It'll be interesting to see what they would get for him with his durability issues, but that talent level is just so good when he's on the field. So yeah, I would. Camden had a really good question in our chat. Would the GM go? That could be the casualty there. I still think they give them one more year. I still think they do. Probably replace your coordinators, start over there, and then they can each get their own one more time for sure.
Yeah, but they have to do that, really do it and do it right. They've got to lock in on a quarterback. And I think we're going to circle around to the quarterback, but it's going to be a recurring theme because
with a few of these teams,
3 years ago, this division was Tom Brady, Matt Ryan, Drew Brees, and Cam Newton. And now it's Tom Brady and
right. Exactly.
And you've got to lock that position down. So
it's going to be a fight for the bottom next year, everybody. Of all these people who need quarterbacks throughout the whole league, it's going to be just amazing. All right, let's move on to the Atlanta Falcons. So the Atlanta Falcons made some pretty big shifts this year. Obviously, they got rid of Matt Ryan. They traded him to the Colts. Didn't he go to the Colts? Yeah, the Colts.
Went to the Colts.
Which is interesting for the Colts. I still forever, trying to replace that Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning type player, and they've not been able to do that. But they had a lot of draft picks, and a lot of people were really impressed with the draft that they had, especially their first rounder. Drake London, wide receiver out of USC. Oh, look at your face. You just glowed. The kid is just hot. Like, people are all about it. The funny thing is Marcus Mariota is going to be throwing the ball to him, which is, again, a stopgap, people. And you're going to keep hearing this theme over and over again in this division. But that kid's got some crazy good talent.
When he's 6'4", he's almost bordering on tight end size. If he bulks up, I would say give him 2 years to really come into his physical size, and it wouldn't surprise me to see him transition to tight end. The problem is there's more money for wide receivers than there are for tight ends. Jimmy Graham would tell you all about that and franchise tags and everything, but they just did a really nice job in the draft in general. This was one of the few picks in the top 10 that Lisa and Sonia and I all agreed on when we sort of did our preview show, is that the Falcons needed a wide receiver. If Mariota is going to have any success there, they needed someone for him to throw to. They have that whole Calvin Ridley situation and that, everybody's moving around. They've got Kyle Pitts. So now you've got Drake London, and it should be interesting with that. I was happier with Arnold Abikadi, if I'm saying his name right, the edge rusher that they drafted, because they had a lot of problems last year with their defense getting off the field with the field position. And their giveaway takeaway ratio was horrendous last year. And so getting a high valued, high quality, high talent edge rusher, I think was a really big deal to them. In general, I gave them an A on their draft. I just thought, they picked up Desmond Ridder, the Cincinnati quarterback, who I love. I love my Bearcats. Once my Buckeyes were out of the playoffs last year, I was all about the Bearcats. All of Ohio really rooted for them. And he was in my top 2 quarterbacks in this draft. And so I was surprised that he fell as far as he did, but I was excited to see Atlanta get him, because I think, to your point, Mariota is a stopgap for this year. Ridder is going to need a little bit of time to grow into that. While Cincinnati made it into the playoffs and all of that, they still did not face the SEC caliber talent that's closer to NFL defenses that he will see this year if he gets any playing time. And I think mentally Mariota is a good mentor in the locker room. He's not like some of those guys who's, I can still start and it's all about me and I don't care about anybody else. I think he will do a nice job coaching him up and mentoring him and working with him a little bit while he owns the starting job. So I think they've made a lot of strides this year to kind of fix the things that were really deficiencies for them last year.
I have to tell you, I've never been so pissed in my life as when they picked Troy Anderson out of Montana State. So that's my alma mater. For those of you guys who don't know, I'm a Montana State girl, and I wanted him in Seattle so bad I could taste it. He is an amazing linebacker. They are going to do so well with him. But you're right. They took a couple of linebackers. They took a running back. They took a tight end. They really kind of piecemealed a lot of the holes that they had, and they did a really good job with that. It was interesting that you said that you thought Desmond went a little later than you thought he would. He thought so too, and was not quiet about it. I don't know if you have listened to that phone call with the Falcons that he had. He said, why is it not the whole DK Metcalf, why did it take you so long? It was just literally why was I still sitting here? And he was a little defiant about it. And I like that. I thought that was good, because that means he's going to come in there and really want to earn that job over Marcus Mariota. And I think that he could, depending on how he plays. You're right. He's got some NFL-ness that he needs to learn and wiggle that in. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with him. So if you look at this depth chart, God, I'm still pissed about that linebacker. I wanted him so bad. Anyway, I was so mad. So you have Marcus Mariota. They have then Desmond. Is it Ridder? I always say Ryder. It's a Ridder. And then they have Felipe Franks. I want to know who Felipe is. I want to meet him. I want to find out who Felipe Franks is. They do have Cordell Patterson and Damian Williams. They have Drake London. The rest of their wide receivers, Brian Edwards, and then I think it's Zacchaeus is how you say it. I'm probably butchered that, and I apologize. They do have Kyle Pitts, still one of my favorite players from last season. Love that kid, right? But then you kind of once again run into what you run in with the Panthers, is there's not a lot of name recognition there.
Yeah.
You do have Grady Jarrett showed up on their defense, which I think was a good addition there. But once again, this feels to me, besides their fantastic kicker and my Montana State linebacker, how this team is not ready. They're not close. They need a quarterback unless Ritter can totally come in and blow the doors off the joint, which he very well could. This team doesn't feel like to me it's going to improve much. Mariota is definitely not an improvement over Ryan. But they don't feel to me, Kate, as far as the Panthers do.
Yeah, I feel like the Panthers with their 5 wins last year did more to improve their team. The Falcons had 7 wins last year, and I feel like they're about exactly in the same place. They replaced the things they lost, and they maybe got a little better, but not much. I mean, I think with the draft, at least, I think they made really good choices and did what they could, but I didn't see anything in the offseason that made me be like, oh, look, they're really trying to do something. It's almost like once Brady unretired, some of these other teams decided to just concede the division to him again, and
they're like,
we'll save our money and we'll come at it next year.
We're gonna rack up those draft picks and just sit there and take them for next year. I don't disagree. So for the Falcons, they have Arthur Smith as their coach. This is just his 2nd season, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens. He's kind of old school. I kind of dig listening to him talk to his players. Sometimes he's kind of old school a little bit, but I do like that
he looks like someone's dad. I don't know what it is when I see him. Totally. Of all these young coaches, and they've only been there a couple of years, I'm like, he looks like someone's dad.
He looks like a high school football coach that's been coaching for 40 years at, Blue Valley High, whatever it is. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I kind of dig that. He fits the aesthetic there with, the ownership and everything. But, so it'll be interesting to see what happens and just to see what just a little bit of a shakeup will do for that team. But, again, you're right. They had 7 wins last year. 7 or 8. Well, I mean, we'll have our prediction show for sure later in the season, but I don't know. I ain't that thrilled. But it's the next 2 teams that I want to talk about that are a hell of a lot of fun. Let's start with the New Orleans Saints. All right. I'm just going to say this. I'm just going to put it out there for everyone, and I don't care what anyone says. I love Jameis Winston. I love the fire Jameis Winston has. I love that he gets pissed off on the field, and you can see it. I think that he is so much fun to watch when he's on the field. Okay, I get it. I totally get it. He also has these durability issues, but thank God we put away the Taysom Hill ridiculousness that happened.
I was going to tell you, I love the fact that Taysom Hill is now on their depth chart as a tight end.
And not a starter.
Thank you. Right. Neither. We have been done with the Taysom Hill experiment for years, and I'm glad that he's gone. It's going to be weird to watch Saints football without Sean Payton. He's been there forever. But I love the option, the choice of Dennis Allen, defensive coordinator, stepping up and taking over that team, because offense has never been their problem. Defense has been what has kept them down and kept them back. And hopefully what we'll see here is going to be different than what we've seen the last couple defensive coordinators that I've seen elevated to head coach. Those teams were not better defensively. So I'm hoping with this one, we have Mike Zimmer, defensive coordinator in Cincinnati, goes to the Vikings. They have no defense. Right. I mean, and now he's gone. So, or anyway.
Yeah.
It would be nice if he brings his defensive mentality to the Saints and they become a much more defensive team, because ultimately you've got to get through Tom Brady, and you're going to have to get through Aaron Rodgers and some of these other quarterbacks in the NFC if you want to get to the Super Bowl. And you've got to have defense to do that. And they haven't up until now, but they might this year.
Well, let me say this. The interesting thing, they picked up some fantastic defensive pieces. So we're going to talk about that in a minute when we get to the depth chart, but let's start with their draft. So this is so funny because I'm so afraid I'm going to say this name wrong, because you said, how do you know when someone doesn't watch college football? They say this kid's name wrong. So Chris, how do you say his last name?
Olave.
Olave. Oh, I do say it right.
Yes, you do say it right. It
says Olave, do they? That sounds right.
Okay, I heard it. I was at the combine and I heard it.
That's your boy. You were
He is my boy.
Excited about
He
that.
was. Garrett Wilson was rated higher in the draft and he went first, but Chris Olave is my boy. He is the kind of receiver who will go get, if you just throw it within like a 3-foot radius of where he is, he will go get that ball for you. He is a quarterback's best friend, and he could be whoever ends up quarterbacking the Saints. It could end up being.
It's going to be Jameis. It is. I
He
fell
could
in
be
on the
Jameis's
Ravens.
best friend.
I
Okay.
like him. I don't know
I
why.
like him too. And
And I hate quarterbacks. You know that.
I know. And I like his attitude. And
I do
so,
too.
you know,
I do.
9-8 last year, they finished on a 2-game winning streak. So they were at
Yep.
least, you know, rolling into the offseason. They had a shot at the playoffs, an
Mm-hmm.
outside shot. They were still in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Olave is absolutely NFL ready week one and will absolutely he's somebody I'm going to be taking a look at in fantasy football. My problem is most of my fantasy football leagues are with other people from Cleveland who are going to go after like Ohio State receivers. Like maybe in the Archer League I'll be able to get him in the second or third round where he belongs, but here I'd have to take him in the first round if I want to get him. So I think he will put up points and he's just that clutch receiver. He's that guy that you can go to on third down when you need 4 or 5 yards or 6 yards and get you the first down and move the marker. He's that guy that you can go to. I talk about this with a lot of people about teams. People talk about it in basketball. Who's that guy you want shooting that last shot to win the game, or who's that receiver you want catching the ball when you have to have a first down to extend that drive? And Chris Olave is that kind of receiver. And so I was excited that he went to what I consider a pretty good team. I think New Orleans is really close
I
to
think they
being
are, especially with
where
the
they need to
additions they've
go.
made. The additions
Yes,
they've made this year. So let's wrap up their draft. They didn't have a ton of draft picks. It looks like they only had 5 draft picks. But so they had Trevor Penning, offensive tackle out of Northern Iowa. You know, Iowa, they have those big old boys up there.
they do.
Alante Taylor, safety out of Tennessee. DeMarco Jackson, linebacker. Appalachian State. Jordan Jackson, defensive tackle out of the Air Force. But that is not where they made their moves, other than their first round pick. So they managed in free agency to pick up Tyrann Mathieu, who to me, I know that it seemed like with Kansas City that maybe he had lost a step or something. I don't think so. I think he was so utterly frustrated in the Kansas City defense that he was playing the best that he could within the bounds that he had. And that's from watching a lot of Chiefs football, where we know that defense is not their strongest suit.
Yeah,
Obviously, that you're all about the offense. So they picked him up. I think that he's going to come out. He's pissed off that the Chiefs didn't take him back, even though he said he would take less money. And so, which I don't think was a bad move on the Chiefs, but we'll get that when we get to the AFC West here in a few weeks. But I do think that this is a great landing spot with Dennis Allen as his head coach.
absolutely. Because I get it. He's got a chip. He's another guy with a chip on his shoulder. You should have paid me. And from a business standpoint, again, I agree with you. What didn't make sense for the Chiefs to pay him. But his mentality is, I wanted my money. You didn't give it to me. Now I'm going to go over here and show you. And Dennis Allen is the perfect coach for him because the defense they've tried to run needed a player like the Honey Badger to do what he does and to be who he is. And I think he will inspire this defense and their current defenders in a lot of ways. They've got some really good talent on that defense, and they've just needed a quarterback of the defense, right? They need that one guy, that face of the defense to really, the Browns have Myles Garrett, there's Aaron Darnold, there's JJ Watt. There's each of these teams have like the face of their defense, and the Saints really couldn't find one. And I think he will absolutely be that and just set the tone for what this defense is going to do.
Yeah, the rest of the team. So they have Marshawn Lattimore, Marcus
Yep.
May. They have Paulson Adebo, Zach Vaughn, Marcus Davenport, Cameron Jordan, who is insanely good. He's just getting a little older. We understand that. And then their depth is actually really nice. So their defensive depth is good. I think that, they did pick up, they have Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, Jarvis Landry ended up with the Saints. Offensively, they're pretty solid.
Yep.
Defensively, they're solid to really maybe very good. I think that this year, as long as Jameis doesn't lose his mind, which we know happens with him sometimes, that this team is going to give the Bucs a run for their money. Will they be able to top them? I don't know. It just depends on how some of these young kids play. And the injury, we always say that everything looks shiny on paper. But I'm fascinated by the Saints team. The Seahawks play New Orleans in New Orleans this year, and I'm going to that game. And it's not that I necessarily want to see the Seahawks play because we understand this year is a rebuilding year for Seattle. We have no problem with that. I can't wait to see this team I want to watch the Saints play. I want to see how this works. I think it'll be good. And I'm with you. I'm promoting coordinators doesn't always work, But Dennis Allen has been a head coach in this league before, and he seemed like the perfect fit to slide in there. So it's going to be really interesting. I will say this, Kate, though, and I think you'll agree with me. I wonder how much Sean Payton will still have his finger in this pot. I do think that, those phone calls will be made, but it is a huge culture shift for them. He's been their coach for so long. This and the Bucs has happened to the Bucs too. So it's kind of interesting to see what happens with them at that point. So I'm kind of excited to watch the Saints. I think that they're going to be a fun team this year. Now, before we move on to the Bucs, I want to talk, because we're talking about the Saints, we talked about the Falcons. I have said this before. Outside of the Seahawks-Niners rivalry, the Falcons-Saints rivalry is my favorite rivalry in football. And if you guys don't watch a lot of Saints or in Falcons football, or if you don't watch Twitter on the days that those teams play each other, do it. Find the hashtags. Find the way these fans talk to each other. It's hilarious. Some of it can get mean, but for the most part, it is so funny and so much fun. There's rarely where you have two fan bases who truly hate each other as much as those two do. And yet no one really knows why. Like, it's not like it's a 50-year-old rivalry. They just can't stand each other. I love it.
They're geographically, they're pretty close.
Yep.
So, and it is one of those that has grown over the years. And I think social media has really helped it to grow. The only thing that I will add regarding the Saints is, so last year, from a playoff standpoint, the NFC West sent 3 teams and everyone else sent 1. Would not be surprised if the NFC South sends 2 teams. If the Saints defense does what I think it could do, they don't have to beat the Bucs. They just have to beat 2 of the NFC West teams so that they're one of the teams that gets a wild card, that they have a very good shot at that wild card spot.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm real excited about the Saints this year. All right. I know, you're supposed to only like your one team, but that's not how I play. I like a bunch. I think they're so fun. So, all right. So let's move on to Tampa Bay. Oh.
Do we have to?
Yeah, we do. Because honestly, so they lost their head coach. Bruce Arians has decided to retire again. We'll see how long it sticks this time until someone pulls him back out of it. Their new head coach is Todd Bowles, who I actually really like as a head coach. I think he got completely screwed in New York. And I love the fact that that he already knows this team. He knows how they work. And he's going to come in there with head coaching experience and the respect of the entire league. I liked Todd Bowles. I was thrilled at that hire. I really was. And then you had the unretiring of Tom Brady, which, honest to God, on this show, we called it. We said we never believed it for a second. There was no way in hell, because he never said the word retire in a statement, people. I'm just saying. And so I think that with Tom Brady coming back, I think, of course, that gives them a huge boost. As far as we know, once again, at some point, he has to not be as good, right? Like, he should have gotten out on top. That's all I'm just saying. But anyway, he should have pulled a Peyton Manning and just retired.
Well, and really, where are his diminished skills? Because that's one of the things that Belichick is known for. Belichick knows when to get rid of people when they've got like a year, maybe 2 left. And he's just the Energizer Bunny quarterback. He just keeps going and going and going. I don't know what Gronk's doing.
I don't either.
So I think that's a big question mark still for this team. But, Chris Godwin was a solid piece of this team and lost a lot of last year with that injury. And I'm hearing he is back and better than ever and just fine and ready to go. And so that bodes well for them as well. Mm-hmm. And then when you look at what they did in the draft, taking defensive end Logan Hall
makes me nauseous. I'm not going to lie. It looks so good.
They took Logan Hall, who's easily going to be able to replace like Sue or Vita Vea if they need someone to do that. They got Luke Gadecki, who is just insanely amazing. And then Rashad White is sort of a long-term plan at quarterback. But Leonard Fournette ain't getting any younger. Is he even still on their depth chart?
Oh, no, didn't he go?
Did he go? Like, I don't know what they're going to do for running backs.
He's still there. Yeah, he's still there.
Yeah.
So, we'll see.
So, he may actually get some time. I was surprised with how few picks they had and how late they picked. Mm-hmm. Getting Cade Otton at tight end is interesting if Gronk doesn't come back. Or even if he does, let's face it, he's not the Gronk that he used to be. He's not getting
he didn't have great
he's not getting 20 to 25 targets a game. He's getting 4 or 5, 6. You know what I mean? So they've got to start grooming somebody else to take over for him. But they really, really reloaded as opposed to rebuilding this year. They replaced a couple people and they added some depth. And it looks like they're just planning to go into this season and be like, all right, we still got Brady. Whatever else, everything else we have is fine. Mm-hmm. Let's just go take. And when you look at them compared to the other quarterbacks in this division, again, I'm channeling Lisa. Right. Brady alone will give them 4 wins than any other team in the division. At least it did last year. So we'll see if that still translates into that many wins.
As our friend Michelle Jinks says, until he proves otherwise, right? He is still the best in the league until he proves otherwise. Camden said Tom Brady always gets a division that's falling apart or trying to rebuild. It's incredible. No, honey, it's smart. I think that's like just smart. I think that he gets it, but also at the same time, he goes up, and this is where for those of us who spent a good chunk of our football lives hating Tom Brady, I still have a great amount of respect for him because he does go up, though. It's not just that he only has to play his division. He beats Aaron Rodgers. He beats, the Patrick Mahomeses. He beats the Drew Breeses. He beats the Aaron, he does what he's supposed to do.
Yep.
And it's annoying as crap, and we all know it, but he just does. But he also always has fantastic teams around him. I'm not kidding looking at this. I mean, so you have Brady, Fournette, Evans, Goodwin, Cage, Cameron Brate, Donovan Smith, Aaron Stinney, Brian Jensen's their center. I know Lisa doesn't know centers, but I will tell you, he's a great center. They have Shaq Mason, Tristan Wirfs, and then they have Akeem Hicks, Vita Vea. I mean, Levante David, Shaquille Barrett, Antoine. It goes on and on, right?
It does. It does.
And it is fantastically impressive. Where I think that they got bit last year and they did not end up going or to or winning the Super Bowl was injuries, because some of these players are older. We have to keep that in mind. This is not a baby team. Like, these guys are older. And so that could be a bigger hit for some of them. And then for a while, they were off. I mean, we saw some of those games last year where, they just didn't look like they were clicking at all. I think it'll be very interesting to see what Todd Bowles does with them this year and see if he changes anything up. He's not going to change what Brady's doing up, but and maybe the people around him and that sort of thing. See if he uses the run game a little more to keep his 75-year-old quarterback healthy. I don't know. So at this point, we'll see.
And it's we learned a lot from COVID and the 17-game season, and I think the concept of a pitch count is something. A snap count is going to start coming to some of these teams where you've got older running backs, where you've got injury prone running backs that maybe they're not getting the 22 to 26 carries they used to get. Maybe you're dropping them to 16 to 20 over 17 games and running a second and third. We signed another, I hate to keep referencing everything back to the Browns. I've now got 4 running backs signed on my roster because you've got 17 games to play and you've got to shuffle these guys in and out, and injuries happen. And the Bucks did have injuries. They were minor, but it was multiple people the same weeks, and they won 13 games. But even in some of those, they didn't look good. And to your point, they got to the end as they neared the end of the playoff run. It was just too much. So I'm excited to see. I love Todd Bowles. I love the hire. I agree with everything you said when you started this conversation. Super excited to see him. He got a raw deal in New York, and it'll be interesting to see how he allocates everyone's time, so to speak, as we're moving through the year. We may even see Brady sitting a lot more in fourth quarters than he would like to keep him and his legs fresh and to keep him healthy and not risk him. And you may see some other guys get some snaps at the end of games if they've got a decent lead. It's a different kind of philosophy.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily going to be a bad philosophy. It just kind of depends, I guess, on what they're going to do, what they need to do to keep Brady fresh to the playoffs. I mean, that's just the way it's going to be now.
Yeah.
3 out of the 4 teams, Kate, in this division are going to be looking for quarterbacks next year, unless Jameis lights the world on fire, and he's really the only one. And that's still going to be iffy. This division feels a lot like the division Brady came from for all those years, where, all of those teams struggled until Buffalo finally found their guy, until maybe Miami now has found their guy. Like, there just seems to be the Jets
still struggling. He left the division, and they're, I feel bad for Miami and the Jets, because New England was just replaced with Buffalo. Just went from one,
I know.
where the quarterback goes, the
Right.
division goes, and it went from that one to that one, and they're
Yeah.
struggling to find their identities. But you're absolutely right. They're going to be, even if Matt Corral plays out, I don't see how, if they have an opportunity, they pass on a quarterback. So these teams
Right.
are all going to be looking to figure that out,
Mhm.
and it'll be interesting.
Right.
It'll be
And
very interesting to see what they do.
I'm kind of excited. Like I know that people get really sad when their team has to rebuild and everything falls apart. And Kate, you understand this because sometimes it can go on for years. I think it's real fun. Like I like to see the new stuff that comes up. So it'll be interesting. So all right, everyone. Next week we start with the AFC. We have gone through all the NFC teams. We go to the AFC, which to me, I'm sure to Kate and actually to probably everyone, is the way more interesting conference this next year. And it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about. So many changes have happened in that conference. So much shifting around. New dominant teams. It's going to be a blast. So next week we will start with the AFC. So I hope you join us. We will be right here on YouTube and on Twitter at 8:00 every Tuesday night throughout the entire season. And we hope that you join us then. Good night, everybody.